Chapter 1: The Basement of the World. The air in the sub-basement of the repurposed textile mill smelled of ozone and stale coffee. It was a scent Michael Wilkes had come to associate with the truth, while the rest of Baltimore slept under the humid blanket of a January that felt more like July. Michael stared at a flickering monitor. The date was January 22nd, 2026. "They're moving it, Mike," Sarah whispered, her fingers dancing across a mechanical keyboard. "The Bulletin just went live. 85 seconds. It's the closest we've ever been." Michael adjusted his glasses, his eyes reflecting the harsh glow of the Doomsday Clock's digital interface. 85 seconds to midnight. It wasn't just a metaphor anymore. To the public, it was a warning. To Michael, it was a confirmation of the anomalies he'd been tracking in the stratosphere. "It's not just the nukes or the AI," Michael said, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. "They aren't telling the public about the modification trials. The Clear Skies Act was supposed to regulate weather modification, but my sensors are picking up silver iodide and sulfur injections at levels that suggest a weapon, not a drought relief program." Michael Wilkes was not a famous man. He had no Nobel Prize, no chair at a prestigious university. He was a man who had seen the inner workings of the Department of Energy and walked away when he realized the math didn't add up to a future. He had spent the last 3 years building a team of outcasts, brilliant minds who preferred the truth over a paycheck. "If the world stays at 85 seconds, they'll panic," Leo, the team's physicist, added from the corner. "But if they knew that the humidity spikes in the Atlantic were being manufactured to steer storms toward the Eastern Bloc, they wouldn't just panic. They'd revolt." Michael stood up, his tall, thin frame casting a long shadow against the concrete wall. "That's why we're here. We aren't just scientists anymore. We're the signal in the noise. Every social media platform, X, Meta, TikTok, the VR streams, they're all being scrubbed by the clean feed algorithms. We need to find a way to bypass the filters. If we can't tell the world what's happening in the next 72 hours, the clock won't just hit midnight. It'll stop." Chapter 2: The Variable in the Sky. By 4 a.m., the team had processed the latest satellite telemetry. While the official report from NOAA blamed the record-breaking 2026 heat wave on a standard El Niño cycle, Michael's team was looking at a different set of numbers. "Look at the refractive index over the North Pacific." Leo pointed to a thermal map. "That's not natural cloud cover. That's solar radiation modification. Someone is spraying aerosols to bounce sunlight back into space, but they're doing it in a concentrated corridor." Michael leaned in. The Clear Skies Act, H.4403, had been touted as a way to protect the heavens, but Michael knew a loophole when he saw one. Section 12.4 allowed for experimental national security atmospheric research. It was a blank check for weather warfare. They're testing the mirror effect, Michael realized. If they can cool one part of the world while letting another bake, they can control the global food supply without firing a single shot. This is why the clock is at 85 seconds. The atomic scientists know the tech is being misused, but they're being pressured to keep the details vague. "We tried the traditional route," Sarah reminded him, her face illuminated by the blue light of her terminal. "I sent the data packets to the Times and the BBC last month. The clean feed filters flagged the files as misinformation before an editor even saw them. The AI is trained to kill anything that mentions SRM or weaponized weather as a conspiracy theory." Michael looked at his team. They were tired, hunted, and underfunded, but they had the truth. "Then we don't send it to the editors," Michael said, his voice regaining its steel. "We don't go through the front door. We need to embed the data into the platforms themselves. We need to turn the algorithm against its masters. We're going to seed the truth like they seed the clouds." The plan was insane. It involved hijacking the metadata of viral content to carry pieces of their research, a digital mosaic that could only be assembled by the people. As the sun began to rise over a Baltimore that was already 80 degrees in January, Michael Wilkes knew the countdown had truly begun. Chapter 3: The Ghost Protocol. The plan to bypass the clean feed filters required a level of digital sleight of hand that Sarah called the Ghost Protocol. They couldn't simply upload a PDF of their findings. The automated sensors would vaporize it in milliseconds. Instead, they had to break the data into millions of tiny, unrecognizable fragments. It's like steganography on steroids, Sarah explained, her eyes bloodshot but focused. I'm hiding the atmospheric data inside the pixel drift of viral cat videos and dance challenges. To the AI, it looks like background noise or a compression artifact. But if you have the right key, the pieces come together to form the full map of the SRM injection sites. Michael watched the progress bars. The team had set up a dark node, a server disconnected from the main grid, powered by a hum of hijacked lithium batteries. Marcus, the team's signal specialist, was busy tuning a series of high-gain antennas aimed at a low Earth orbit satellite they'd managed to borrow, using a legacy backdoor. The Clear Skies Act isn't just a law, it's a shield for the hardware, Marcus grumbled, adjusting a frequency dial. I've tracked 3 unmarked drone launches from a private facility in Nevada. They aren't NOAA. They're contractors, defense tech giants like Ether Systems. They're the ones actually deploying the sulfur blankets. Michael looked at the latest Doomsday Clock update on a separate tablet. The Bulletin had just released a statement. The 85-second mark reflects a total collapse in atmospheric transparency between superpowers. It was a coded cry for help. The scientists at the Bulletin knew they were being watched, and Michael realized he was likely the only person on the outside with the technical proof to back them up. If we trigger the Ghost Protocol, Michael warned, there's no going back. The moment these packets start reassembling on the public's devices, the NSA will trace the source to this mill. We'll have about 20 minutes before the cleanup teams arrive. 20 minutes is plenty, Sarah said with a grim smile. Let's give the world something to talk about. Chapter 4. The Shadow Ban. The first wave of the data dump was a subtle success. Across the world, millions of people watching a popular cooking stream noticed a strange flickering in the corner of their screens. To the naked eye, it looked like a minor glitch, but for those with the Michael Wilkes key, a small, open-source script Michael had leaked to the underground developer community weeks prior, the glitch transformed into a high-resolution overlay of the current weather manipulation over the Pacific. It's working, Leo whispered, monitoring the social media sentiment analysis. People are starting to ask why there's a massive, square-shaped cloud formation moving against the wind currents off the coast of California. But the victory was short-lived. Within minutes, the major platforms began a rolling blackout. Entire servers were throttled. The term square cloud was added to the forbidden keyword list. They're aggressive, Michael noted, pacing the small room. They aren't just deleting the content. They're rewriting the metadata in real time. They're replacing our data with AI-generated fact checks that claim the images are deepfakes. Suddenly, the lights in the mill flickered and died. The hum of the servers was replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. Outside, the distant sound of a rotor blades chopped through the humid Baltimore air. They found us, Marcus said, grabbing his go bag. The Ghost Protocol worked too well. We poked the bear, and now the bear is at the front door. Michael grabbed the primary hard drive, the one containing the physical coordinates of the Ether System's launch sites. We moved to Site B. If we can't reach the world through the big platforms, we go local. We use the mesh networks. Every city in America has a pirate radio or an independent Wi-Fi hub. We're going to turn the entire country into one giant, decentralized broadcast. They scrambled through the service tunnels of the old mill just as the first flashbang detonated in the room above. The pursuit had moved from the digital realm to the physical, and the 85-second clock was ticking faster than ever. Chapter 5. The Mesh. The rain that began to fall as they emerged from the tunnels wasn't natural. It had a metallic, bitter tang, the unmistakable signature of silver iodide. Michael wiped a drop from his glasses, his heart hammering against his ribs. Behind them, the textile mill was swarming with tactical teams in unmarked black gear. No insignias, no warrants. Just a clinical, quiet erasure. Site B is 6 blocks away, Michael hissed, gesturing toward an old derelict radio tower atop a 1920s apartment complex. Marcus, how's the signal? Marcus checked a handheld spectrum analyzer. They've jammed the cellular bands in a 2-mile radius. Standard blackout protocol. But they haven't touched the LoRa mesh. It's too low power, too slow for them to care about. They ducked into the basement of a community center where a woman named Elena was waiting. She was the leader of the Baltimore MeshNet, a group of hobbyists and activists who had built a private internet using routers strapped to chimneys and water towers. Michael Wilkes, Elena said, her eyes scanning the street through a narrow window. I saw your data packets before the platforms went dark. The Clear Skies map. It showed a storm being diverted toward the agricultural belt in the Midwest. My brother is a farmer in Iowa. He's losing everything to a flash drought. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because it's manufactured, Michael said, setting the hard drive on a cluttered workbench. We need your network, Elena. We need to bridge your mesh to the national fiber backbone before they cut the city off entirely. Elena nodded. We've got nodes in D.C., Philly, and New York. If we can hop the signal from roof to roof, we can bypass the federal filters. But you need to be fast. They're patrolling with Stingray devices to find any active broadcast. Chapter 6. The Clear Skies Act Exposed. While Sarah worked with Elena to bridge the networks, Michael and Leo began decrypting the Clear Skies legislative files they had skimmed from a secure server. What they found was more chilling than the simple weather control program. It's not just about rain or sun, Michael, Leo said, his voice trembling as he pointed to a line in the our .4403 subappendix. Look at the frequency modulation. They aren't just seeding clouds. They're using the aerosol layers as a medium for ionospheric heating. They're turning the atmosphere into a giant antenna. For what? Michael asked. For communication and disruption, Leo explained. If you control the ionosphere, you can silence any satellite you don't own. You can blind the opposition's GPS. This Clear Skies Act isn't an environmental bill. It's a global mute button. That's why the Doomsday Clock moved to 85 seconds. The Bulletin scientists realized that the U.S. is preparing to go dark, to disconnect the world, so they can move pieces on the board without anyone seeing. Suddenly, Sarah's monitor flashed red. I'm in. I've bypassed the metafilters through a loophole in their VR advertising stream. I'm pushing the raw footage of the Nevada launches now. It's going out to every VR headset currently active in the tri-state area. How many people? Michael asked. Roughly 3 million, Sarah replied. They're going to see the drones. They're going to see the Ether Systems logo. And they're going to see the projected path of the drought steer over the Midwest. The room went silent as the upload bar reached 100%. For a moment, the world felt like it was holding its breath. Then, the police scanner's Marcus was monitoring exploded with chatter. Public disturbance reports are spiking, Marcus said, a small spark of hope in his eyes. People are literally ripping off their headsets and running into the streets. The clean feed couldn't stop it because it came through the unfiltered gaming channels. We just took the clock to 84 seconds, Michael whispered. We've given them the truth. Now we have to survive the night, so we can tell them how to stop it. Chapter 7. The Digital Doppelganger. The blowback was instantaneous, but it wasn't the physical raid Michael expected. Instead, it was a character assassination of surgical precision. As the team huddled in the dim light of Elena's basement, Sarah's monitors began to populate with breaking news, alerts from every major network. Mike, you need to see this, Sarah said, her voice tight with dread. On the screen, a high-definition video of Michael Wilkes appeared. He was sitting in what looked like a sterile government briefing room, looking directly into the camera. He looked rested, professional, and most importantly, nothing like the haggard man standing in the basement. My name is Michael Wilkes, the digital avatar began. I am a former contractor for the Department of Energy. Recently, a group of extremist hackers stole my identity and my research. They are using sophisticated AI to manipulate weather data, to incite global panic and destabilize our national security. The Clear Skies Act is our best defense against environmental collapse. Do not trust the leaked packets. They are Trojan horse viruses designed to cripple your devices. Michael watched his own face lie to the world. The lip sync was perfect, the micro-expressions, the blinking, even the slight rasp in his voice. It was all there. Generative AI. Leo spat. They've fed every video and audio recording of you from the last 10 years into a real-time rendering engine. To the 4 billion people scrolling on their phones right now, that is the real Michael Wilkes, and you are the glitch. They're poisoning the well, Michael said, feeling a cold weight in his chest. If they make the truth look like a lie, and the lie look like the truth, the Doomsday Clock doesn't just stay at 85 seconds. It vanishes because no one knows what time it is anymore. Chapter 8. Infiltrating the Hive. The team realized they couldn't win a war of words against a government-backed AI. They needed physical, undeniable proof that no algorithm could debunk. They needed a master sample of the aerosol compound being used by Ether Systems. The nearest launch site is in Nevada, Marcus said, pulling up a localized topographical map. There's a weather research station 2 hours west of here, near the Appalachian Trail. Our telemetry shows a high-frequency uplink that matches the drone control signatures. If we can get inside and grab the physical flight logs and a canister of the seeding agent, the deepfake won't matter. The chemistry won't lie. The drive was tense. They used a nondescript, rusted-out delivery van provided by Elena's network. As they climbed into the mountains, the temperature dropped unnaturally fast. Snow began to fall, not in soft flakes, but in hard, crystalline pellets that rattled against the windshield like buckshot. "This is it," Michael said, pointing to a sprawling facility hidden behind a double layer of electrified fencing and no-fly zone signage. "This is where the clear skies meet the dirty ground." Using Marcus's signal jammer to create a temporary blind spot in the perimeter cameras, the team breached the outer fence. The air here felt different, thick and ionized, making the hair on Michael's arms stand up. They reached the loading docks of the main hangar. Through a high window, Michael saw them, dozens of sleek, predatory drones, their wingspans wide and their bellies loaded with pressurized tanks labeled property of U.S. Gov, Project Sky Shield. "We don't just take the data," Michael whispered as they slipped through a side door. "We're taking a drone. If we can fly one of these into a populated area and let the independent scientists see the tech for themselves, the clean feed won't be able to hide the evidence. It'll be a 15-foot piece of treason sitting in the middle of a public square." Chapter 9. The Midnight Server. Inside the hangar, the silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of cooling fans and the distant drip of condensation. The drones, officially designated as AS-9 stratospheric aerosol injection units, looked less like research tools and more like weapons of war. Their matte black surfaces seemed to swallow the dim emergency lighting. "Marcus, find the flight controller. Leo, get a sample of that coolant," Michael commanded, his voice a low vibration. While the others worked, Michael moved toward a central terminal. He realized that to truly expose the Clear Skies Act, they needed the Midnight Server, the localized brain that synchronized these drones with the global Doomsday Clock variables. It was here that the data was translated from scientific risk into operational targets. He plugged Sarah's custom-built bypass drive into the terminal. The screen flickered, revealing a terrifying dashboard. It showed a real-time countdown synchronized with the Bulletin's clock, but with an added layer: resource reallocation priority. "They aren't just moving the clock to warn people," Michael whispered, his eyes widening. "They're using the 85-second status as a trigger for Phase 2. The moment the clock hits 80, the system automatically begins diverting all moisture away from non-compliant zones. It's a global extortion engine." "Mike, I've got the canister," Leo called out, holding a pressurized steel tube. "But we've got a problem. The drone's GPS is hard-locked. If we move it more than 10 meters without the encryption key, it'll self-destruct." Chapter 10. The Warning Shot. "Then we don't move the drone," Michael said, turning back to the terminal with frantic energy. "We move the data. We use the drone's own high-gain satellite uplink to broadcast the Midnight Server logs. It's a direct pipe to the military satellites. They can't shadow ban their own secure channels." Just as Marcus began to patch into the drone's transmitter, the hangar's overhead lights slammed on, blinding them. "Step away from the asset," a voice boomed over the intercom. A side door hissed open, and 4 private security contractors, ether systems cleanup crews, stepped out, their rifles leveled. They didn't look like guards. They looked like soldiers. "The game is over, Wilkes," the lead operative said, stepping into the light. He wore a headset that glowed with a soft blue light, an augmented reality interface. The 85-second setting was a courtesy. "If you interfere with Project Sky Shield, we move to 0. Do you want to be the reason the world ends tonight?" "The world ended when you decided you owned the weather," Michael countered, his hand hovering over the execute key on his bypass drive. Suddenly, the hangar floor shook. A localized atmospheric discharge, a controlled lightning strike from the testing array outside, hit the building's grounding rods. The power flickered. In that split second of darkness, Marcus threw a localized EMP grenade. Electronics screeched. The guards' AR headsets shorted out, sending them into temporary blindness. "Run!" Michael yelled, grabbing the bypass drive. They scrambled toward the loading dock, bullets whistling past them and thudding into the composite wings of the drones. They dove into the delivery van just as the facility's sirens began to wail, a low-frequency moan that sounded like the earth itself was screaming. As they tore down the mountain road, Michael looked at the drive. They didn't have the drone, but they had something better. The digital proof that Doomsday was being manufactured by design. Chapter 11, Analog Solutions. The delivery van's engine groaned as Michael pushed it down the winding Appalachian backroads, headlights off, navigating by the pale, sickly glow of a moon obscured by chemical haze. Behind them, the mountain facility was a hive of activity, but Marcus had successfully fried the local trackers with the EMP. "They'll have the main roads blocked within minutes," Marcus warned, his laptop screen showing a ghost of a map. "Satellite thermal imaging will pick up the van's heat signature against the cold mountain air. We're glowing like a flare to them." Michael steered the van into a dense thicket of pines, killed the engine, and looked at his team. "We can't outrun a satellite, and we can't outprocess their AI. So, we stopped trying to be high-tech." He led them to a prearranged dead zone, a deep limestone cavern system used by local moonshiners decades ago. Inside, tucked behind a false wall of rotted timber, sat a relic of the 20th century, a high-powered shortwave radio transmitter and a manual printing press. "While Sarah hides the data in the digital ghost protocol, we go analog," Michael said. "Leo, start the press. We're going to print physical maps of the Sky Shield injection sites. Marcus, tune this radio to the emergency ham bands. If the internet is a filtered lie, we'll use the airwaves they forgot how to monitor." The team worked in the damp chill of the cave. The rhythmic thump hiss of the manual press was the heartbeat of a new resistance. They were producing the Wilkes Report, a physical, unhackable document that detailed the 85-second countdown and the clear skies deception. Chapter 12, The 80-Second Scare. By morning, the world woke up to a terrifying new reality. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists had just issued an emergency correction. The Doomsday Clock was being moved again. This time, it wasn't a scheduled January update. It was a reaction to unprecedented atmospheric instability. 80 seconds to midnight. In the cave, the team listened to the frantic reports on a battery-operated transistor radio. The flash drought in the Midwest had suddenly inverted into a catastrophic, unnatural deluge. 5 inches of rain had fallen in 2 hours over Chicago, accompanied by strange, neon green lightning. "It's a feedback loop," Leo whispered, looking at his notes. "The ether system's drones were damaged during our escape. Their Sky Shield grid is malfunctioning. They've accidentally triggered a localized atmospheric collapse." The Clear Skies Act was being invoked on every news channel as the only solution to these natural disasters, with the government calling for even more funding and more drone deployments to fix the weather they had broken. "They're using the disaster to justify the weapon," Michael realized, his face pale. "They moved the clock to 80 seconds to scare the public into surrendering total control of the sky. We have to get these papers and this broadcast out now." Michael grabbed the first stack of printed maps. "Sarah, can you bridge the shortwave signal to the mesh nodes Elena set up?" "I can," Sarah said. "But the moment I do, the signal will act as a beacon for every drone in the state. We'll be broadcasting our own execution." If we don't, Michael replied, midnight arrives before the sun sets. Let's give them the frequency. The cave hummed as the old vacuum tubes warmed up. Michael Wilkes picked up the microphone. This is the truth about 80 seconds, he began. And it starts with the air you're breathing. Chapter 13. The Viral Seed. The short-wave signal was weak, crackling with the interference of a tortured atmosphere. But it was enough. As Michael spoke into the vintage microphone, Sarah's viral seed script went into overdrive, using the Wilkes key. The scattered data packets hidden in thousands of mundane videos across the web began to resonate with the radio frequency. Suddenly, the clear skies fact-check banners on social media started to glitch. For a few glorious seconds, the algorithms faltered. On millions of smartphones, the AI-generated deepfake, Michael Wilkes, was replaced by a grainy, black-and-white feed of the real Michael in the cave. The 80-second setting is a lie of convenience. Michael's voice echoed through the mesh networks. The storms you are seeing are not the result of climate failure alone. They are the result of a failed calibration in the Sky Shield grid. They are breaking the sky to sell you the repair. The message hit the Generation Z and Alpha demographics first, the digital natives who lived in the cracks of the internet. Within an hour, 80 seconds was no longer a headline, it was a rallying cry. People began printing their own versions of the Wilkes map, taping them to the windows of government buildings and Ether Systems offices. The seed had taken root. Chapter 14. The Terrorist Label. The response from the Department of National Security was swift and scorched earth. At 2 p.m., the President's press secretary appeared on all channels, not as an avatar, but in the flesh, standing before the seal of the United States. Michael Wilkes and his associates have been officially designated as domestic cyber terrorists, she announced. The FBI has confirmed that the atmospheric disruptions in the Midwest were caused by a digital virus Wilkes uploaded to our weather monitoring satellites. He is not a whistleblower. He is an agent of chaos trying to push the Doomsday Clock to midnight for his own extremist agenda. A shoot-to-kill order was authorized. The narrative had shifted. The government was no longer just correcting Michael. They were blaming him for the very disasters they had caused. They're turning the victims against us, Leo said, watching a feed of a mob in Chicago burning in effigy of Michael. If we go out there now, the people might kill us before the drones do. That's the point of the label, Michael said, packing the last of the shortwave gear. If you can't hide the truth, you make the truth teller the enemy. But we have one card left to play. The physical sample Leo took from the hangar. If we can get that to the independent lab in D.C., the chemistry will prove it wasn't a digital virus. It was a physical pollutant. Just then, Marcus's scanner let out a sharp, rhythmic chirp. High-altitude drones incoming. They aren't seeding the clouds this time, Mike. They're carrying Hellfire missiles. We have 3 minutes to disappear into the limestone deeper than we've ever gone. The ground vibrated as the first, warning shot struck the forest above them, collapsing the entrance to their analog sanctuary. Chapter 15. The Deepfake War. The dust from the cave ceiling hadn't even settled before the second phase of the government's counteroffensive began. This wasn't fought with missiles, but with a flood of synthetic reality. As the team huddled in the dark, Sarah's tablet, shielded by a Faraday bag, pinged with a series of intercepted broadcasts. They're escalating the AI campaign, Sarah whispered. The clean feed was now flooded with fabricated confession videos. In one, Leo appeared to be crying, claiming Michael had forced him to sabotage the weather drones. In another, Marcus was seen accepting a suitcase of cash from a foreign operative. The most damaging was a high-fidelity video of Michael Wilkes laughing as he watched satellite footage of the Chicago flooding. It's a psychological saturation, Michael said, his voice steady despite the chaos. They know some people believe the truth, so they're making the truth too ugly to want. They're attacking our character because they can't attack our math. Every time a MeshNet user tried to share the real data, the AI-driven guardians of truth replaced a file with a link to these fakes. The public was becoming paralyzed by reality fatigue, a state where the truth is so buried in high-quality lies that people simply stop looking for it. We need a God minute, Michael decided. One moment of broadcast so raw, so physical, that an algorithm can't rewrite it in time. Marcus, We need that high-altitude footage. Not a digital file, a direct, analog-to-satellite optical feed. Chapter 16. The High-Altitude Truth. To get the footage, they had to climb. Marcus had a specialized, old-school telescopic camera rigged with a manual shutter and a localized microwave transmitter. If they could get to the Devil's Backbone, the highest ridge in the area, they could film the ether system's drones as they entered the injection layer. They moved like ghosts through the scorched forest. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burnt pine. As they reached the summit, the sky above them was a bruised purple, swirling with the unnatural chemicals the team had come to recognize. There, Marcus hissed, pointing his lens toward a silver speck cutting through the clouds. Through the viewfinder, the truth was undeniable. The drone wasn't just releasing a mist, it was deploying a shimmering, metallic veil that looked like liquid mercury in the air. As the sun hit the veil, the light didn't scatter, it bent, creating a terrifying lens effect that focused heat onto the valley below. "I'm recording," Marcus said, his hands shaking, "and I'm not saving it to a drive. I'm side-loading it directly into the emergency weather alert frequency. It's an unencrypted channel used by every pilot and ship captain in the hemisphere." The footage was jarring. It showed the ether system's logo clearly as the drone's belly opened, revealing a payload that looked more like a chemical weapon than a climate tool. As the video hit the airwaves, the team watched on a handheld monitor. For the first time, the deep fake filters couldn't keep up. The raw, shaky, unedited quality of the footage was its own authentication. "The world is seeing it, Mike," Leo said, watching the engagement metrics on the meshnet soar. "The reality fatigue is breaking. People are looking at the sky and seeing what we're seeing." But the victory came with a price. A red light began to pulse on Marcus's gear. "The microwave link, it's like a lighthouse. They've locked onto our position. We have 60 seconds before the ridge is leveled." Chapter 17. The Fracture. The ridge behind them erupted in a geyser of stone and fire. The shock wave threw Michael face first into the dirt, the taste of copper filling his mouth. They were alive, but the silence that followed was heavier than the explosion. As they scrambled into a ravine to avoid the secondary thermal sweep, the adrenaline that had fueled them for days began to sour into exhaustion and doubt. "We can't keep doing this, Mike," Leo said, his voice cracking. He was clutching the steel canister of aerosol like it was a live grenade. "We've shown them the drones. We've shown them the maps. And what's changed? The clock moved to 80 seconds. The government just doubled down on the terrorist narrative. We're just accelerating the panic." "Panic is the first step toward a pivot," Michael countered, wiping blood from his forehead. "Or the first step toward the end." Leo snapped. "What if the clear skies people are right? Not about the lies, but about the necessity? What if the climate is so far gone that this madness, is the only way to keep the planet from boiling? If we stop them, and the temperature jumps 3 degrees in a month, are we the heroes or the executioners?" The team stood frozen in the shadows of the ravine. The unity that had sustained them in the Baltimore subbasement was fraying. Sarah looked at her tablet, then at Michael. "Leo's right about one thing, Mike," she said quietly. "The public is terrified. Half of them think we're saving them, and the other half thinks we're the ones killing them. We're not just fighting a government anymore. We're fighting the human instinct to choose a comfortable lie over a lethal truth." Michael looked at his team, the smartest people he knew, breaking under the weight of 80 seconds. "If we stop now, the lie becomes the only reality left. We don't decide if the world is saved. We just give the world the data it needs to decide for itself. That's the job." Chapter 18. The Underground Network. They were found 3 hours later, not by ether systems, but by a group of men and women wearing camouflage made of repurposed thermal blankets. These were the off-gridders, a decentralized network of engineers, former park rangers, and survivalists who had been living in the signal shadows of the Appalachians since the first clean feed laws were passed. Michael Wilkes, a woman with a rifle and a graying braid, said, stepping from behind a hemlock tree, "We've been following your ghost packets. You're lucky. If we hadn't jammed the drone's infrared sensor, you'd be a charcoal smudge on that ridge." She led them to the hive, a settlement built inside an abandoned railway tunnel. It was a marvel of low-tech ingenuity. Hydroelectric power from a diverted stream, mesh network nodes hidden in birdhouses, and a library of physical books and maps. "I'm Silas," a man in his 60s said, shaking Michael's hand. He was a former satellite technician for NASA. "We've been tracking the SRM injections for years, but we didn't have the Wilkes key to prove the intent. You've given us the why. Now we can give you the how." Silas led them to a terminal that looked like a relic from the 1990s, but was connected to a massive, custom-built satellite dish hidden under a camouflage net outside. "The government thinks they have the only uplink," Silas grinned, revealing a missing tooth. "But they forgot about the old deep space network nodes. They're slow and they're clunky, but they don't use the clean feed protocols. If we can get your physical sample data into a burst transmission through one of those nodes, it'll bypass every social media filter on Earth by hitting the hardware at the ISP level." "It's the zero-day vulnerability," Sarah whispered, her eyes lighting up. "We don't go to the platforms. We go under them." "Exactly," Michael said, feeling the momentum shift. "But to do it, we have to get to the Green Bank Observatory, the quiet zone, where no radio signals are allowed, except the ones we're about to send." Chapter 19. The Zero-Day Vulnerability. The journey to Green Bank, West Virginia, felt like traveling back in time. As they crossed into the National Radio Quiet Zone, the digital world simply vanished. No cell signals, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth. For the first time in years, the clean feed could not reach them. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, staring at her dead phone. "It's like the air is clean again." But the peace was an illusion. Inside the Green Bank Observatory, Michael and Silas met with a skeleton crew of astronomers who had been sidelined by the Clear Skies Act. These scientists had watched as their radio telescopes were repurposed to track atmospheric assets rather than stars. "We found the back door," Silas announced, tapping on a monochrome monitor. "The world's largest social media platform, Nexus, uses an old infrastructure backbone for its global synchronization. It relies on a timing signal from deep space hydrogen masers. If we spoof that timing signal, we can force a global system update. For 60 seconds, every screen connected to the internet will display whatever we send, and the clean feed AI will think it's part of the system's core code." Michael pulled the steel canister from his bag. Leo had spent the drive analyzing the contents using a portable mass spectrometer. "The results are in, Mike," Leo said, his voice trembling. "It's not just sulfur. It's a polymer-coated particulate designed to stay suspended for years, not months. It's a permanent shroud. They aren't trying to fix the climate. They're trying to build a global ceiling they can charge the world to look through." "Upload it," Michael said. "The chemical signatures, the flight logs, the mute protocols. If we're going to hit the 0-day, we hit it with everything." Chapter 20. The Final Countdown. As the team prepared the burst transmission, the transistor radio in the corner crackled to life with a frantic emergency broadcast. "This is a global alert," the voice wavered. "The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has just issued an emergency update. Due to the total loss of atmospheric predictability and the collapse of the sky shield sector over the Atlantic, the Doomsday Clock has been moved. 60 seconds to midnight." The room went cold. 60 seconds. It was the psychological breaking point. In the distance, through the massive glass windows of the observatory, Michael saw the sky turning a bruised, sickly orange. A sky shield drone had malfunctioned nearby, dumping its entire payload at once, creating a localized chemical fog that choked the sun. "The panic is starting," Silas said, looking at a localized radar. "Riots in London, Tokyo, and New York. People think the midnight the scientists warned about is happening right now. They think the atmosphere is literally falling." "It is falling," Michael said, "because the people in charge are dropping it." "Sarah, how long until the maser sink?" 3 minutes, Sarah replied, her fingers flying across the terminal. "But Mike, look at the perimeter." On the security feed, black SUVs were tearing through the quiet zone gates. Ether systems didn't need a signal to find them now. They just needed to follow the trail of the only people left who weren't screaming in the streets. They're going to try to cut the power before the transmission finishes, Marcus said, grabbing a flare gun, the only weapon he had left. Let them try, Michael said, his eyes locked on the 60-second countdown on the wall. We aren't just scientists anymore. We're the last minute of the clock. Chapter 21, The Last Stand. The roar of the approaching SUVs was muffled by the thick, insulated walls of the observatory, but the vibration was unmistakable. Michael looked at the massive radio telescope outside, a giant white ear straining for a whisper from the stars. It was about to become a megaphone for the most dangerous truth on Earth. They're breaching the main gate, Marcus shouted, slamming a heavy steel bolt across the laboratory door. Silas, how much time? The hydrogen maser is warming up. 2 minutes until the synchronization window opens, Silas replied, his hands steady despite the chaos. But we've got a problem. They've brought a mobile jamming unit. If they get within 100 yards, they'll drown out our uplink. Michael turned to Leo and Sarah. Take the physical samples and the backup drives. There's a service tunnel that leads to the old receiver array in the valley. If they take this room, you have to make sure the evidence survives. Marcus and I will hold the line here. I'm not leaving the data, Mike, Sarah said, her jaw set. I have to manually bypass the Nexus handshake protocol, or the burst will just bounce off their firewall. The first blow struck the door. A heavy ram. The steel groaned. Michael grabbed a fire extinguisher and a heavy lead glass lens from a telescope kit. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew the physics of a bottleneck. Marcus, the flare gun. If they get through, aim for the jamming unit's cooling intake. We don't need to win a firefight. We just need 60 seconds of clear air. Chapter 22, The Upload. The door erupted inward in a shower of sparks and splintered reinforced wood. 2 operatives in ether systems, tactical gear, stepped through the dust, their suppressed rifles raised. Transmissions off. Now, the lead agent barked. Thwip. Marcus fired the flare gun. It didn't hit the soldiers, but it hit the bank of lithium-ion batteries Sarah had rigged near the entrance. A blinding white magnesium flash filled the room. In the confusion, Michael lunged forward, not at the men, but at the manual override lever for the telescope's dish. Sarah, go! Michael yelled. Sarah hit the enter key. On her screen, a progress bar appeared, syncing with Nexus master clock. 10%, 20%. Outside, the massive dish began to swivel with a low, tectonic moan. It was aiming directly at the primary Nexus communications satellite. One of the agents recovered, aiming his rifle at Sarah's terminal. Michael tackled him, the 2 of them crashing into a rack of servers. Don't you get it? Michael gasped, pinned against the humming machinery as the agent's forearm pressed against his throat. If you kill this broadcast, the clock hits midnight. You have a family, don't you? Do you want them breathing that polymer shroud forever? The agent hesitated for a fraction of a second. A human glitch in a corporate machine. 80%, 90%. The laboratory was suddenly filled with a high-pitched electronic whine. The 0 day was triggering. Across the world, on 4 billion devices, from the giant screens of Times Square to the cheapest smartphones in rural villages, the Nexus platform flickered. The clean feed, AI attempted to intervene, but it was too late. The data was being injected at the hardware level, disguised as a mandatory system heartbeat. Upload complete. Michael fell back as the agent's grip loosened. Every screen on the planet suddenly went black, replaced by a single, high-resolution image. The chemical composition of the Sky Shield shroud, followed by the coordinates of every ether system's launch site, and a recording of the mute protocol being activated. Underneath the data, a single sentence appeared in every known language. The clock is being driven. Look up. The sky is a lie. Chapter 23. The Physical Wall. The silence in the Green Bank Observatory was more jarring than the explosion. For 10 seconds, the world's digital pulse simply stopped. The ether system's agents stood frozen, their tactical headsets chirping with the frantic, incoherent screams of their superiors. The 0 day hadn't just leaked a file. It had paralyzed the infrastructure of global deception. The signal is out, Sarah whispered, her hands shaking as she pulled them away from the glowing keyboard. It's everywhere. It's hard-coded into the cache of every device. They can't delete it without wiping every phone on Earth. The lead agent looked from his rifle to the screen, where the chemical polymer data was still scrolling. He looked at Michael, who was slumped against a server rack, bruised and gasping for air. The agent didn't fire. He slowly lowered his weapon and tapped his earpiece. "Command, this is Unit 4, he said, his voice hollow. The asset is irrelevant. Everyone has the data. My own wife just messaged me from Denver. She's asking why the sky is green." Outside, the secondary physical wall arrived. A fleet of heavy-lift helicopters crested the ridge, their spotlights cutting through the chemical fog. But they weren't landing. They hovered, uncertain. The chain of command was dissolving in real time. When everyone knows the truth, the cleanup crew has nothing left to hide. "We have to get out of the target zone," Marcus said, grabbing the steel canister, the physical proof. "They might stop the lies, but the drones are still on autopilot. The atmospheric collapse we saw in the Midwest is spreading." Chapter 24. The World Awakens. The Great Awakening of 2026 was not a peaceful event. It was a chaotic, global realization that humanity had been steered toward a cliff. As Michael's team emerged from the Green Bank Observatory, they saw the lens effect in the sky beginning to fracture. Across the globe, the reaction was a tidal wave. In Washington, the Clear Skies Act was repealed within hours by a Congress fearing for their lives. In the Midwest, farmers blocked the roads to Ether Systems facilities with tractors, while in the cities, millions of people simply stopped working and looked up. The data Michael had broadcast was undeniable. It included the kill switch codes for the SRM drones. Independent scientists, now armed with the Wilkes key, began sending out counter signals. One by one, the black drones in the stratosphere ceased their spraying and drifted toward the ocean on controlled descent protocols. "Look," Leo said, pointing toward the horizon. For the first time in weeks, the bruised, metallic orange of the sky was beginning to thin. A pale, natural blue began to peek through the chemical shroud. It was a bruised sky, a damaged sky, but it was theirs again. "We didn't fix the climate," Michael said, watching the drones fall like shooting stars. "We just stopped the murder of the sky. Now the real work, the hard, honest work begins." Chapter 25. 86 seconds. 1 week later, the world was still reeling, the economy in a state of truth shock. But the air was clear. Michael Wilkes sat in a small, quiet park in rural West Virginia. He wasn't in a bunker, and he wasn't in a lab. He was just a man on a bench. Sarah, Leo, and Marcus were nearby, finally sleeping in a world that didn't require a ghost protocol. His tablet chimed. It was a notification from the Bulletin of the atomic scientists. They were holding a global press conference. For the first time in nearly 80 years, the spokesperson began, her voice echoing through the speakers of 1 billion free devices. "The forces of transparency have pushed back against the forces of catastrophe. We have seen the evidence of the Sky Shield deception. We have seen the courage of those who refused to let the clock hit midnight." The digital display on the screen changed. The hand of the Doomsday Clock, which had been trembling at 60 seconds, did something it had never done with such velocity. It moved backward, 86 seconds to midnight. It was only a 6-second retreat, but it was a universe of difference. It was the margin of hope. Michael Wilkes closed his eyes and felt the sun, the real, unshielded sun, warm his face. He was still a terrorist in some databases and a savior in others. But as he watched a group of children playing under a clear blue sky, he knew the only title that mattered. He was the man who told the time. And for now, the world had a little more of it.